Okay, and we're back, and I'd like to introduce my guest now. It's Tim McGinnis, and Tim is a writer for obstructedview.net, and he also is one of the hosts on a podcast, a Cubbies podcast, Wrigley Talk Friday. Tim, welcome to MetsMusings. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Tim, the Mets are going to Chicago. First time they're seeing the Cubs this year. First time they're going to Wrigley Field. And 3-game set, and we've been struggling here in Mets land, but got a big win today, so that's we're going to go in happy at least, and hopefully we have our best pitcher going tomorrow. So you'll get to see Matt Harvey. How are the Cubs doing? I know they officially in a rebuilding mode. Have they announced it as such? With Theo Epstein there now, and things moving along, and they seem to be playing a little bit better ball this year.
Well, they've been pretty upfront since Theo came on board. Theo and Jed Hoyer as the GM, they've pretty much been upfront and open, saying it's not so much. They're calling it not so much a rebuild, but a more of an organizational restructuring. They're looking not just at the team, the major league team itself, but also the entire minor league organization. And if you look at it from that perspective, they're definitely making headway. The farm system is definitely looking a lot healthier than it was under the Jim Hendry years and the last years of the Tribune ownership. But the major league team, we still have some issues.
Well, there seems to be a lot of that going around this year.
Yeah.
and they're kind of on the same path that the Mets are, because the Mets brought in Sandy Alderson to rebuild the farm system. And it seems to be the trend all over baseball lately with the younger players, I guess because the money gets so out of hand.
It does, and it's also getting – the new CBA makes it awfully hard to rebuild on the fly. Before when you let your free agents go, you would get the compensatory picks based on whether they were an A or a B free agent. Well, that's not really the case anymore. Now you get a compensatory pick if they get an offer of X amount of dollars, and it's usually a really high number. So those marginal free agents don't bring those extra picks, and guys like Theo and Billy Beane and some of the other, quote, Moneyball guys kind of lived off of that system of getting free agents on the cheap and then letting them leave and taking the compensation pick. And you could build a farm system very quickly. That's not true anymore. So I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the young guys that teams have. They're not letting them reach free agency. They're locking them up early, and we just saw the Cubs do that with Anthony Rizzo either earlier this week or last week. I can't remember. Time is muddled now, but just recently they locked up Rizzo until 2019, I believe.
And speaking of Rizzo, he's been on quite a hot streak lately.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with him. I was pretty excited when they acquired him last year. They gave up Andrew Kashner, who was a well-respected prospect, but I think the Cubs and I had kind of written him off as more of a relief prospect at that point. So if you can trade a reliever or who you believe will be a reliever for an everyday first baseman type guy, I think you have to do that every day of the week. And so I was very happy with it. And he's just been great. I mean, he's playing good defense. He's got good power. He's a good kid. He's somebody that you can make the face of a franchise very easily. I don't know if he'll ever put up like Pujols numbers, but he's a very solid everyday first baseman.
Well, look, he's hitting now. He's hitting like 406 or something, I think, the last time I looked. So, he's not going to do that over an entire season. But, you don't always have to have Pujols numbers. I get annoyed sometimes when they talk about all of these statistics and the emphasis on home run hitting, and you can score just as much runs if you just had guys that hit in the proper spaces with men on base. Just look at the Giants. They finished next to last in home runs last year, and here they won the World Series. So the Cardinals contend every year, and they don't really have home run hitters on that team. So, if you can get 20, 25 out of him and hitting in the high threes or even in the mid threes, it's a pretty good acquisition. I guess I'm encouraged or interested in seeing him play because we have a first baseman that is so bad right now, struggling, that it's really he should be in the minor leagues. But enough about that.
Yeah, you're talking about Ike?
Yes.
Yeah, I had him on my fantasy team, so I apologize to the Mets fans because my fantasy team tends to curse players. So now that I've recently dropped him, so you should see a rebound.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So that's my present to you guys.
All right. All right. So tell me, how's the pitching staff shaping up for the Cubs this season?
The starters have been fantastic. I don't expect them to continue at this level, but the guys that we kind of figured would be ticketed for long relief when Matt Garza gets healthy, it's been real difficult because both Scott Feldman and Carlos Villanueva have been pitching really well overall. Jeff Samardzija is kind of continuing what he did last year. He's really stepped up. And it's hard for me to believe as a Cubs fan because watching him, when they said they were going to put him in the rotation last year, we laughed. It was a joke. I mean, if you ever listened to our podcast last year, we would be like, oh, and Jeff Samardzija is getting a shot in the rotation, and then we would laugh for like 5 minutes. And something happened, and he's now not walking everybody in the ballpark. His fastball is tremendous, and he's just getting he's not quite upper echelon like the Yu Darvish, Kershaw level, but I would say a next step down after that, like a really nice rock within your rotation. So I've been very happy overall.
Okay.
The bullpen's another story. They're just a gasoline fire. It's not good.
Well, bullpens are always a problem. It seems I guess it's hard to home grow relief pitchers. Years ago they never did it, and it's just a difficult job, and it's hard to find a good bullpen. We have the same problems here. But I think part of the problem that the Mets had was the starters were only going 4 or 5 innings outside of Harvey, and it really exposed the blue bullpen. I mean, they were pitching 3-4 innings every night, and you can't do that,
That's going to get tough. Yeah.
Yeah, you get your weaknesses get exposed. Now, they've done a decent enough job when the starters went at least 7 innings. Like today, Nice had a 7.1, 7 1/3 innings. The Lions came in, got 2 outs, and then our closer Parnell came in and got the not 1, 2, 3 in the ninth. He gave up a single, but got him pretty quick. So. Bullpens all across baseball. Just those few rare teams. St. Louis has a pretty decent one. San Diego has a good one. Pittsburgh has a pretty good one. But I mean, it's a crapshoot with them every year. It seems.
It is, and part of the problem with a bullpen is you're basically going to be putting guys in there that are failed starters or failed closers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the two, like. No kid goes out on his little league team dreaming about being a long reliever.
It's right.
You want to be a starter, you want to be a closer, and when you're not good enough to be either one of those, you either have to be in the minor leagues, or if you want to stay in the major leagues, you have to pitch in the bullpen.
Right.
So it's always going to be a lower talent overall. So I think the successful teams try to groom their young guys, their young power arms, by bringing them up through the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
You saw Lance Lynn in St. Louis was in the bullpen. and now he's one of their better starters.
And
you saw Liriano did that in Minnesota. I think he spent like 2 years in the bullpen before joining the rotation. So I think that's where you can really build a bullpen is through your farm system, getting the young guys, and then when they don't do so well, you can always just put them back in the minors. So I think the Cubs are getting to that point. They're not there yet.
Yeah, they were talking about this on the Mets broadcast yesterday or last evening about how they mentioned Lynn and that, but not enough teams are doing that where they'd bring up a prospect, put him in the bullpen, and let him pitch there, and then at least he's getting used and he's getting major league experience. But they seem to, we're calling for here now because the pitching's been so bad for Zach Wheeler, the big prospect down at AAA, and but they're waiting until I would imagine they're waiting till the Super 2 eligibility date comes so they can keep him a little bit longer. But
and that's the question with the top echelon prospects is you don't want to start that clock too soon.
Mm-hmm.
It's a balancing act. I don't envy a lot of these GM's decisions.
No, it used to be so easy years ago. Now they've got all this other stuff to contend with. So how is the offense going this year? Are they scoring a lot of runs? Hitting good? We discussed Rizzo. How's everybody else doing?
Well, they're not scoring a ton of runs. If you look at on an individual basis, they're not terrible. But they've had a real hard time hitting with runners in scoring position, and that started to come around lately, and you're starting to see their win-loss record has improved lately. So I think that's starting to normalize a little bit, and they're not going to be awful, but they're also not going to be great. We've had a nice start from Nate Scherholtz. He's a left-handed outfielder, and he's been hitting right-handed pitching real well. And then David DeJesus, he's nearing the end of his career, but he's having a nice time. He's a great guy in the clubhouse. He's having a nice start. And, our other young player that we locked up forever is Starlin Castro. And he's been a little slow starting with getting on base, but he's had a little bit of pop, and he's starting to come around. So it's an average-ish offense, probably a little below average, I'd say, overall.
And is the defense sharp?
It depends where you hit the ball. No, they're actually. I think they're getting a little better overall on defense. I think probably the weakest point is probably still Soriano in left, who's made a big improvement in the last 2 years under Dale Swaim and his staff. They've really worked with Soriano to help him out. And the other one who always goes in waves is Starlin Castro. He'll make the amazing plays, but he'll also sometimes boot the plays that you should make. On the flip side, then there's Darwin Barney at second, who makes all of the plays, and he makes them look easy, and he's just ridiculously good.
Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing all of those guys. And your bench, what is that looking like?
It's not great. They've picked up some guys. They have their talents. Julio Bourbon, they just picked up off of waivers. I forget who let him go. Originally with Cleveland, and I don't know who let him go this year. But he's done a nice job. He's speedy on the bases, but he's never going to have a great bat. Cody Ransom is another kind of 4A player. He's older. I think he's like 37 years old, so he fills in as like a utility guy. Scott Harrison is supposed to be the other side of the platoon for Nate Scherholtz to hit left-handed pitching. He's been very slow out of the gate, although he's starting to hit the ball with a little bit more authority. So the bench is definitely a weak spot.
Well, Harrison hit 20 homers last year here, so I guess based on that, that's how he got the contract.
Yeah, if we can get that, Hairston, we'd be very happy with him. We were pretty happy with the signing. So far, he hasn't shown up yet. But
yeah, he's struggling.
we're hopeful.
It just seems when these guys, I mean, everybody, when they sign with another team, they just seem to struggle that first year. I mean, Josh Hamilton is playing in the same division. It's just a different team, and he was struggling. It's just, I just find it very odd what it is with the free agents.
I think it's tougher than people think it is to switch teams and switch cultures, and especially guys who grew up in an organization. Like Hamilton has moved around a little bit, so you would think he would be a little better at it. But you see some guys that grow up through an organization, they reach free agency and leave, and then it's a whole other culture, it's a whole other way of operating. Because teams are similar, but their whole culture can be very different, and how they treat the players, things like that. And I think that has a psychological effect in a lot of ways where, because baseball players, you can get in a baseball player's head very easily psychologically.
Right.
They're creatures of habit, and when that habit changes, they sometimes have a hard time adjusting.
That's right. Well, Tim, you're going to get to see Matt Harvey tomorrow afternoon.
I wish. I'm working. I really want to go see. I wanted to go see that game.
Well, you might have to watch the replay. But he is definitely a thrill to watch. He could be dominating at times. His last start, he wasn't as strong out of the box as he has been. He struggled a little bit, but he gutted out 7 innings and got a no decision. So we'll take that because he's still 4-0. But he really is a real deal. And I don't know the rest of the pitching. I guess you'll get I haven't seen the matchups yet, but probably.
I haven't either. I only knew Harvey.
Yeah, I would think it was probably be Harvey, maybe Hefner, and I would imagine Dylan G then, who's been struggling greatly. He's completely lost with his mechanics and everything else. So we're hoping for a sweep. You're hoping for a sweep. And we'll see what happens. And also this weekend, Marlon Byrd makes his return to Wrigley Field. How do you think he'll be treated by the bleacher bums out there?
I think well overall. He was pretty popular his first year. He came up with some awfully big hits. He really struggled last year before they let him go, and Wrigley fans turn on a player very quickly. But I think overall, there were a lot of T-shirts. They had the Peter Griffin, Family Guy, Peter Griffin saying "Bird is the word" on the T-shirts. I mean, it was, and he was always great with the fans out in the. He's a nice guy. He knew how to interact with the fans. So I think overall he'll get a nice reception. But he wasn't here very long, so it won't be like a long-standing ovation or anything like that.
Right. But he has some ties, so that's, it's always nice to go back and to be welcomed back by the team that you played.
Yeah, he didn't leave under bad circumstances, so I think everyone will be at least cordial to him. There will be a nice golf clap when he comes to the plate, at least.
So how do you think about the Cubs overall? They're on the right track, it seems. And how do you think they'll end up the year in the division?
Well, I started the season going on record saying I thought they were going to lose 100 again.
Wow.
Yeah. I started – that was on the assumption that Matt Garza was never going to pitch for us again, and also that Scott Feldman and Carlos Villanueva were no good. So I'd like to revamp those numbers a little bit, but at the end of the day, there's still a trade deadline coming, and this team is rebuilding. So, what happened last year is they actually were not awful. And then they traded away Dempster. And Garza got hurt, and the rest of the roster was just decimated. And so there was this death march to the end of the season. And I still think that could happen. So I don't know if I'll say 100 anymore, but they're still going to lose in the 90s. because anybody with any talent that can bring anything back is going to get moved at the deadline. Jesus Soriano, probably one of the pitchers.
But
there's going to be a lot of roster movement.
Yeah, they've been talking about moving Soriano for the last how many years?
Well, he's finally at a point in his contract where it's not ridiculous to talk about anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's true. He had that big contract. So.
Yep.
All right. Well, good luck to the Cubbies this weekend. Not really, but, I'm just trying to be polite. So.
Of course. Of course. And I look forward to seeing Matt Harvey. I want to enjoy him before I start hating him like I always hated Dwight Gooden for beating the crap out of the Cubs every time he faced them.
And I want to thank you for being on the show. And is there anything you'd like to plug? Go right ahead.
I'd say I don't know why you would as Mets fans, but if you wanted to check out what's going on in Cubs world, our blog is obstructedview.net. We try to do some sabermetric stuff. We try to be a little bit more of a voice of reason in Cubs blog world. And then also we have our weekly podcast on Fridays called Wrigley Talk Friday. There's actually a link on the blog, or you can Google it and you'll come up with it on Blog Talk Radio.
Okay, great. And I want to thank you for being on the show. And
yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
You're very welcome. And we'll be back after this message. You can now hear our show while on the go with Stitcher Smart Radio. On-demand news, talk, and more on your mobile phone. The latest episode is always available for you. No syncing needed and no memory or storage wasted. Available for your iPhone, Android phone, WebOS phone, or your BlackBerry. Downloading is easy. Go to Stitcher.com or check out your app store. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. For all the listeners of Mets Musings, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 14-day trial to give you a chance to check out their service. Over 75,000 titles to choose from in all different categories, including science fiction, mysteries, biographies, sports, computers, you name it, they have it to download. To download your free audiobook today, go to audiblepodcast.com/MetsMusings. Again, that's audiblepodcast.com/MetsMusings for your free audiobook.
Introducing baseballpodcast.net. Listen to your favorite baseball podcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, only at baseballpodcasts.net. You can hear Mets Musings, the Mets podcast, Brewtown Sports. It's a Milwaukee Brewers podcast. We have the Japanese Baseball Weekly on Japan Baseball Weekly podcast. We also have an Atlanta Braves podcast talking about the Braves there. And, of course, your Fightin' Phillies podcast called Phillies Talk. So won't you stop by? That's baseballpodcasts with an S.net.
Five 516-619-6341. That is the voicemail comment hotline. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can give us a ring and we'll play it on the air, or you can do it the old-fashioned way. If you have a question or comment, you can email me at metsmusings@gmail.com, or you can go to metsmusings.com if you want to leave a voicemail the widget way. Click on the widget on the right-hand side and send a voicemail that way, and we'll play it right here on the show. Okay, I want to thank Tim McGinnis once again for coming on the show, as he's with Wrigley Talk Friday, a podcast on the Blog Talk Radio Network, and obstructedview.net. He writes for that, a Chicago Cubs blog. So check them out and keep informed of all the teams that the Mets are going to be playing this year, and It's always fun to read about the other teams and see how they're doing. All right, so the Metsies have traveled to Chicago, to the Windy City for 3 big games. Matt Harvey goes tomorrow afternoon, I should say. And then they come home for 3 with Cincinnati. And then guess what? We'll be back on again to give you a report on those games. So remember, it's been a rough road so far. But, maybe they can turn it around. The pitching's looked a little better, the starters. And some of the offense, hopefully that'll come around. But remember to keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets.